In the forests and cities of South and Southeast Asia, a cat-sized animal moves through the canopy at night. It climbs with the ease of a primate, eats fruit like a bear, hunts like a carnivore, and leaves behind one of the most valuable products on Earth. Most people know it by a single misleading name, the civet. But that label hides a quiet evolutionary experiment, one that sits alongside the cats rather than within them. One known for coffee, but that same association may yet prove to be its downfall. This is Paradoxurus, a genus of palm civets that thrive at the boundary between forest and city, between carnivore and omnivore, and between what we think we understand and what we've overlooked. If you'd like to learn more, check out the document in the description with research papers and image credits. The Asian palm civet we're focusing on today belong to the family Viverridae. It's a less familiar family to most people than other carnivorans. But before exploring it in detail, we need to take a step back to explain why the term civet is, by itself, such a confusing label. Civet is not a scientific term. It's a common name, applied, often inconsistently, to a range of small cat-like carnivorans that are not all closely related. Even within the family Viverridae, the name doesn't map cleanly onto evolution, and that's before considering so-called civets that aren't viverids at all. Some viverids are commonly called civets, others are known as genets or African linsangs, despite sharing a common ancestor. What unites them is not a single defining trait, but a broadly conservative feliform body plan. So let's zoom out to help us make sense of this messy term. Living carnivores split early in their evolution along a familiar divide: dogs versus cats. Bears, seals, and weasels all emerged from the dog-like branch. Today, our story takes us to the other side of this split, the cat-like carnivores, or Feliformia. The earliest branch of this feliform tree is one of the so-called civets. The African palm civet is the sole living member of the family Nandinidae. Arboreal and solitary, this unassuming omnivore is one of the most genetically isolated carnivorans, having diverged from the rest of the lineage over 44 million years ago. Next comes the superfamily Phalloidea. This is the one feliform group without any civets at all. It includes just two families, the cats themselves and the Asiatic linsangs. Sleek, highly specialized predators, these lineages represent the classic feliform design, geared towards speed, stealth, and hypercarnivory. The family Viverridae branches off separately. This is where the Asian palm civets belong, along with the genets and African linsangs. Feliforms that retained a more generalized body plan and a broader ecological toolkit. Finally, there is the superfamily Herpetoidea. This group includes three families: hyenas, mongooses, and the Malagasy civets. It's an unusual collection, but you may notice that this is where the third lineage of so-called civets appears. The Malagasy ones are far more closely related to mongooses than to any other civet. Within the wider Feliformia radiation, viverids occupy an interesting position. They retain many traits that likely resemble the early feliform condition: elongated bodies, flexible ankles, relatively unspecialized teeth, and a type of movement suited to both climbing and traveling along the ground. They are not ancestral to cats, nor are they evolutionary relics, but they do preserve a body plan that has proven remarkably adaptable. Within Feliformia, the family Viverridae represents a quieter evolutionary path. Viverids tend to share a broadly conservative body plan: elongated bodies, relatively short legs, and flexible joints that allow them to climb, crouch, and more easily move between branches and ground. Their teeth reflect the same versatility, capable of processing meat, but also able to eat fruit and leaves. Ecologically, viverids are generalists. Across the family, diets often include small vertebrates, invertebrates, fruit, and other plant material. Many species are nocturnal, solitary, and strongly scent-oriented, relying on chemical communication rather than visual display or social cohesion. What's striking is not how specialized viverids are, but how adaptable they've remained. While other feliform lineages narrowed into highly defined roles: pursuit predators, ambush hunters, bone-cracking scavengers, or even anteaters in one unusual instance, Viverids retained a flexible toolkit that allowed them to exploit forest canopies, forest floors, and increasingly human-altered landscapes. This adaptability is what makes the family difficult to summarize, and why the name civet has been applied so loosely. But it also explains why viverrids, and palm civets in particular, have persisted across changing climates and environments for tens of millions of years. Within this family, Paradoxurus represents one of the clearest expressions of that strategy. In Viverridae, Paradoxurus belongs to a small cluster of palm civets that share a common ecological theme. This group, often referred to as Paradoxurinae, includes the binturong, the masked palm civet, and the small-toothed palm civet. Despite their differences in size and appearance, these animals are united by a similar way of life, primarily arboreal, highly omnivorous, and built for flexibility rather than speed or power. Compared to the more carnivorous genets and true civets, Paradoxurines rely far more heavily on fruit, and their teeth and jaws reflect that shift. They are climbers and foragers first, predators second. Traits that help explain why Paradoxurus is so comfortable moving between forest canopies, plantations, and urban edges. At a glance, palm civets look unremarkable. Cat-sized, long-tailed, and low-slung, their silhouette blends easily into the broader idea of a civet. But in Paradoxurus, that familiar outline conceals a suite of traits tuned not for speed or strength, but for flexibility. The body is elongated and relatively light, with short limbs and a long, muscular tail used for balance rather than grasping. Unlike the rigid, digitigrade stance of cats, where only the toes contact the ground, palm civets place more of the foot on the surface beneath them, giving them a stable, almost deliberate gait. Their ankles are also far more flexible, able to rotate and bend in ways that rigid-legged runners cannot. Together, these traits allow Paradoxurus to move confidently along branches, scramble up trunks, and descend head first, abilities that matter far more in a three-dimensional forest than raw acceleration ever could. The skull and jaws tell a similar story. While clearly carnivorous in origin, the teeth of Paradoxurus are less specialized for slicing flesh than those of genets or cats, indicating their much broader dietary range. Behaviorally, Paradoxurus is built around independence rather than cooperation. Individuals are largely solitary, active primarily at night, and communicate through scent more than sound or sight. Rather than defending rigid territories, palm civets maintain overlapping home ranges, adjusting their movements to seasonal food availability rather than to rivals. Taken together, these traits define Paradoxurus not as a specialist predator, but as an ecological generalist, an animal shaped to exploit opportunity. It is this combination of climbing ability, dietary flexibility, and behavioral plasticity that explains both their presence in intact forests and their surprising success in human-altered environments. For a carnivoran, palm civets eat an unusually large amount of fruit. Across the genus Paradoxurus, diet shifts with season and availability. Small vertebrates, insects, and other animal prey remain important, but fruit often makes up a more substantial portion of their intake, particularly when it is abundant. This is not a fallback food in times of scarcity. It is a predictable, repeatedly exploited resource. Their teeth and jaws reflect this balance. Rather than the blade-like slicing teeth seen in specialist predators, palm civets retain broader molars capable of crushing and processing soft plant material. Combined with a digestive system able to handle a mixed diet, this allows them to move fluidly between animal and plant foods, without committing fully to either. Frugivory brings with it a different set of ecological rules. By consuming fruit whole and passing seeds largely intact, palm civets act as effective seed dispersers, often transporting seeds far from the parent plant. In tropical forests, this makes them quiet contributors to regeneration, linking canopy fruit trees with the forest floor below. Just as importantly, fruit is a resource that rewards mobility rather than speed. It appears in patches, ripens unpredictably, and is often found high above the ground. The climbing ability and flexible movement that define Paradoxurus make sense in this context. These animals are not built to chase prey across open ground, but to locate, access, and exploit food wherever it appears. In evolutionary terms, this dietary flexibility is a strong buffer against change. When prey declines, fruit remains. When forests fragment, cultivated plants and introduced fruit trees can fill that gap. Frugivory does not make palm civets harmless or herbivores, but it does help explain why Paradoxurus has endured in environments where more specialized carnivorans have struggled. If one species defines what a palm civet is, it is the Asian palm civet, Paradoxurus hermaphroditus. Despite the name, it is not a hermaphrodite. Hermaphroditus refers to the presence of a perennial scent gland in both males and females, a feature that historically confused early naturalists because the gland resembles male genitalia. The Asian palm civet has the broadest range of any member of the genus, stretching from the Indian subcontinent through mainland Southeast Asia and into much of the Indonesian archipelago. Across this vast area, it occupies an equally broad range of habitats: tropical and subtropical forests, plantations, agricultural mosaics, and increasingly towns and cities. This wide distribution has also raised taxonomic questions, with some researchers suggesting that what we currently call the Asian palm civet may represent several closely related species, particularly on islands, though this remains an area of active debate. This geographic and ecological spread is not the result of recent expansion. It reflects how well the palm civet's generalist strategy works. The same anatomical flexibility described earlier, limbs for climbing, adaptable teeth, and a digestive system comfortable with both animal and plant foods, allows the species to persist in environments that differ enormously in structure and resource availability. Diet is the clearest expression of this versatility. We have already seen how adaptable their diet is depending on the season, from fruit to vertebrates to insects. But they carry this flexibility into disturbed landscapes too. Cultivated fruit, plantation crops, and human food waste are readily incorporated into their diet, reducing reliance on any single food source. Behaviorally, the Asian palm civet remains largely nocturnal and solitary, even in densely populated areas. Individuals maintain overlapping home ranges, communicating primarily through scent marking rather than direct interaction. This low level of social dependence makes them unusually tolerant of fragmentation. A single animal can exploit a patchwork of trees, gardens, and buildings without needing large, continuous territories. As a result, the Asian palm civet is often the first viverrid to appear and the last to disappear as forests are altered. In many parts of Asia, it now occupies landscapes where few other native carnivores remain. This persistence has earned it a reputation as both a survivor and a nuisance, depending on the context. Yet, this success comes with consequences. Of all palm civets, the Asian palm civet is the species most frequently drawn into direct contact with humans, as a crop raider, an urban scavenger, and eventually as a commodity. The traits that allow it to thrive alongside people are the same ones that make it vulnerable to exploitation. And it is here that the story of palm civets begins to shift, from quiet evolutionary presence to a far more complicated relationship with us. While the Asian palm civet demonstrates the genus's signature adaptability, its relatives reveal how the same basic blueprint can be tuned to different environments. The brown palm civet, Paradoxurus jordani, is a forest specialist confined to the western Ghats of India. Unlike its widespread cousin, it rarely ventures into human-altered landscapes, relying almost entirely on undisturbed forests. Its diet is strongly frugivorous, and its movements are concentrated in dense canopy, reflecting a niche that rewards precision and stealth rather than the broad opportunism seen in the Asian palm civet. Yet despite this more specialized lifestyle, it retains the same flexible limbs, climbing prowess, and omnivorous dentition that characterizes the genus. The Sri Lankan palm civet, Paradoxurus zeylonensis, offers a different perspective. Endemic to the island of Sri Lanka, it occupies both lowland and montane forests, displaying adaptations to diverse microhabitats within a relatively small geographic area. Its diet mirrors that of its relatives, but local fruiting patterns and seasonal variations influence foraging strategies, illustrating how the same anatomical toolkit can produce subtly different ecological behaviors. Together, these species show that Paradoxurus is not a one-size-fits-all genus. Its members share a foundational strategy: arboreal climbing, dietary flexibility, and solitary behavior. But each lineage has been sculpted by local environments, from the sprawling cities and plantations frequented by the Asian palm civet to the secluded canopies of the western Ghats in Sri Lanka. This balance of stability and adaptability is what allows the genus to persist across millions of years and highly varied landscapes. Across much of their range, palm civets now occupy habitats shaped by people, From fruit orchards and plantations to towns and cities, the Asian palm civet thrives where its relatives may struggle. Its generalist diet allows it to exploit cultivated fruit, garden scraps, and other anthropogenic resources, while its climbing skills let it navigate fences, rooftops, and fragmented tree cover. Yet, living close to humans is a double-edged sword. Opportunities abound, but so do threats. Hunting, capture, road mortality, and conflict over crops. The traits that make palm civets adaptable, flexibility, climbing ability, dietary breadth, also make it visible and vulnerable in human-altered landscapes. No single product has made palm civets more famous or more exploited than coffee. Kopi luwak, or civet coffee, has risen to international fame as the most expensive coffee in the world. It is made from coffee beans eaten and excreted by civets. In the wild, this behavior is incidental. Palm civets consume fruit for food, and coffee berries happen to be just one type of fruit. The global demand for kopi luwak, however, has transformed this incidental behavior into a marketable commodity. Many civets are captured from the wild and kept in small cages or battery-style enclosures. These conditions frequently result in severe welfare problems. Limited space restricts climbing and movement, poor hygiene increases disease risk, and stress can trigger aggression or behavior abnormalities. It doesn't matter how flexible or adaptable civets are, no animal could thrive in these conditions. Demand for kopi luwak creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The more the coffee is marketed as a luxury product, the greater the incentive to capture civets, which continue to reduce wild populations and place more individuals into poor conditions. Palm civets are also sometimes hunted for meat or captured for the pet trade. While less widespread than coffee exploitation, these pressures still contribute to localized declines, particularly where forests are fragmented or human activity is intense. Captured civets may be transported long distances, compounding stress and disease risks, and further disconnecting them from their natural ecological roles. Removing civets from the wild affects not only numbers, but also ecological functions. As frugivores and seed dispersers, palm civets help maintain forest regeneration. Local depletion reduces this role, potentially affecting plant dispersal and the broader forest community. Meanwhile, urban-tolerant populations persist, but they do so outside of their natural ecological context, and often in direct conflict with humans. Palm civets now exist in a human-shaped world where their flexibility both aids survival and exposes them to exploitation. The species' adaptability allows them to persist where less flexible carnivores fail, but it also makes them a target. Coffee, pets, and meat are not neutral. They are human-imposed pressures that directly influence the future of Paradoxurus. The story of these animals is, in part, a story of how human fascination and economic incentives can transform natural behaviors into a source of stress, population decline, and ethical concerns. But I don't want to overstate the threat. Asian palm civets are not currently in danger of going extinct. Their populations are decreasing, but they are still considered least concern by the IUCN. They are widely distributed, live in a variety of different habitats, and have large populations. The risks here are not global extinction, at least not yet. The concerns are for animal welfare and the potential fallout if the population decline continues or becomes more drastic. As for the other species, despite their smaller ranges, the brown and Sri Lankan palm civets are also least concern. While forest fragmentation may pose some risk to them, they have escaped the worst of the human persecution. Production of kopi luwak tends to be confined to Indonesia and the Philippines, countries where these species are not found. Taken together, these pressures reveal a consistent pattern. Palm civets are not declining because they are poorly adapted to the modern world, but because they are unusually easy to exploit within it. Their tolerance of disturbance, flexible diet, and ability to live unnoticed alongside people have buffered them from immediate collapse, while simultaneously masking the cumulative effects of removal, confinement, and conflict. It is a quiet erosion rather than a sudden crisis, one that is easy to overlook precisely because the species still appears common. Palm civets are easy to misunderstand. They look cat-like, but they are not cats. They live in forests, but also in cities. They hunt, but they also eat fruit. Even their most famous behavior, the one tied to coffee, is not a defining adaptation, but a coincidence of diet and human attention. For tens of millions of years, lineages like Paradoxurus have persisted not by specializing, but by remaining flexible. Their anatomy, behavior, and ecology reflect a strategy that favors balance over extremes. Capable climbers, capable hunters, capable frugivores. In a world that has changed repeatedly, that restraint has worked. What has changed most rapidly is not the civet, but its context. Human landscapes now surround and permeate much of its range, turning adaptability into both an asset and a liability. The same traits that allow palm civets to survive alongside us also make them easy to capture, confine, and commodify, often without immediate signs of collapse. This is why palm civets matter, not because they are rare or exotic or famous, but because they represent a kind of evolutionary success that is easy to overlook. They are neither relics of the past nor specialists on the edge of extinction. They are quiet survivors, and that quietness can disguise the pressures they face. If coffee has shaped how we see palm civets, it should not define how we treat them. Their story is larger, older, and far more complex than a luxury product. It is a story about adaptability, coexistence, and consequences of mistaking resilience for immunity. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the palm civets. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's still so much to discover about the world's rare and remarkable species. And the more we understand, the better our chances of protecting them. Thanks for watching.